One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine.
Guys!
In a row?
Get ready for another episode of Nine Guys Dynasty Football. I am Jamie G. Esquire the fifth, practitioner of the world-famous Thundergun defense.
He thundergunned all of us.
He thundergunned the shit out of us!
I'm here at Magnum Mills to help you get ready for the trade deadline in your fantasy leagues.
No hesitation, no surrender, no guys left behind. That's how we do it here on Nine Guys Dynasty, presented by CeeDee Fantasy Football. Thank you for checking out our show. Find us wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. We're on social media at CeeDee Same place on the web, CeeDeeFF.com. Very easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please make sure that you click the thumb.
Before we get into our guys for Week 11, we need to highlight any noteworthy guys from Week 10.
Yeah, I guess we should go with the update on Dak Prescott, the Cowboys quarterback here. He's waiting on a second opinion, but the season looks lost. Odds are very high. I'd call them 99.9% that Prescott is done for the season. Adjust accordingly. Perhaps CeeDee Lamb retains a little bit of value. It looks like they're going to trot Cooper Rush out there one more time, but I would expect to see Trey Lance sooner than later. So if Lance is available in your leagues, pick him up. If you want a vulture buy on Prescott in Superflex leagues, that's something you can also think about, but looks like a lost season for the Cowboys, so could even hurt CeeDee Lamb a bit if he gets frustrated. We'll see where that one goes. And then Jamie G, your guy, Dalton Kincaid, got knocked up with a knee. Doesn't look like it's anything long-term. The word on the street is a PCL sprain. That's something that could be like no time. People miss no time. The absolute max is Puka Nacua. We saw missed about 6 weeks. The real thing to take away here is the Bills actually have a replacement in Dawson Knox, whereas if most teams lose their tight end one, they're in pretty deep trouble. But here you have Dawson Knox, pretty solid guy. We've seen him have 9 touchdowns in a season not that long ago. Could be getting increased targets here out there in a lot of leagues. So especially in the tight end premium league, if you're hurting a tight end, whether or not you own Kincaid, I would check that out there. See if Knox is out on the waiver wire. Could be a very useful play for a week or two, especially with the Bills having their bye in week 12. I think that's probably the most likely scenario is to misses next week at the Chiefs, then misses the bye week there. So you have him back in week 13. But again, Knox could be a nice streamer for you. Just something to keep an eye on. And then let's go right into the danger zone. It's a place we don't like to head, but sometimes you got to hit the overdrive. Do what you got to do. How about that Jared Goff meltdown on Sunday Night Football? The Lions still won, don't get me wrong, but 5 picks, and some of those, that was bad. That was like his first season with the Lions. We have not seen that in a minute bad. And if you drill into the stats a little bit, he's been very efficient, historically so, but he's been a much better real-life quarterback than fantasy quarterback. In fantasy, he's kind of middling. He's more of a better QB2 than a QB1, and you wouldn't think that with some of the numbers that the Lions have been putting up. It just gets so much of their scoring from the running backs. Goff has to really kind of lean on efficiency. Doesn't have a lot of volume here. Do you have any concerns if Jared Goff is kind of your long-term QB2 in a Superflex Dynasty League? You know, he hasn't been the greatest, but he hasn't been that bad because he's had such a high floor. Are you worried a bit at all that floor could be in danger?
It's been a while since we've seen this because of how good of a running game they have. But credit Houston, they took away the running game for the most part in that game and forced Jared Goff to have to drop back and throw the football. And he absolutely turned into his evil twin, Jack. And when Jack Goff shows up, it's not the time you think it is. It's not going to be fun, okay? You'd rather have Jared in this case. I know that's weird, but you rather would. Mills, I am worried here. I think the only way I would feel comfortable having him as a QB2 is if I was stacking with like a, say a St. Brown or a, if I already had St. Brown on the lineup or a Jameson Williams or something, I would, I think you'd feel a little bit better, but there's not a lot of upside. He's basically got to be 20 to 22 for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns to get there every week. And it's hard. It's not always going to be like that. You're going to face teams that are going to take things away. And so it's just, I think it's tough.
Yeah, oddly enough, even though it's not like he's an MVP, but he has gotten some accolades, and I think that has led to his name brand value being actually worth more than his actual value, which is kind of weird for Jared Goff, where, it just hasn't been that way, especially for a former number 1 overall pick. So just something to keep an eye on. If you're kind of not a contender, you're in the muck or even a rebuilding team, I wouldn't want to be selling him after a 5 interception game. Just something to keep in mind if he has a good run of a game or two before the trade deadline. Just, keep it out there. You might want to try to upgrade at the position. And I think another position in general in danger is this rookie running back class. According to the FFPC rookie draft ADP, here's who the top drafted rookie running backs were: Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davis. All these guys are pretty much the RB2s, with the exception of maybe Lloyd, who is on IR right now. So one injury away from relevance. But now that we saw Chuba Hubbard sign a fairly big extension to stay in Carolina, it doesn't look like any of these guys have an immediate path to relevance. James Conner is supposed to be a free agent next year, but the Cardinals have a lot of cap room. I would be almost shocked if they don't bring him back. So I think even Benson will be blocked for another year. How are you playing this one, man? I mean, sometimes you can wait on these guys and it works out. We saw that, say, with James Cook there. You waited a year, the thing happened. Other times it just doesn't happen. Even J.K. Dobbins, Tevin Coleman, some of the AJ Dillon, especially, you wait forever and it just never winds up happening. They're clogging up your roster spots. Right now, things are a little crazy. What do you think? Are you trying to buy these guys? Are you trying to get rid of them because you're worried that now there really isn't a runway this year? So it's kind of going to be based on not necessarily luck, but they're going to have to earn the job next year. You might not be starting these guys for a full 12 months. What's your level of concern on these guys? Is there anybody that stands out as a particular guy to buy or sell maybe?
Yeah, I think for me, the ones that I'm targeting here are as potential buys are Jalen Wright and Ray Davis. And the reason why is we've seen a coaching staff want to incorporate these two players despite who's in front of them. You look at Miami, for example, and you've got, Mostert and Achane ahead of them. You don't know how long Mostert's going to be there. They keep wanting to use Jalen Wright. And when you look in Buffalo, yeah, you've got James Cook there, and he likely is going to be there for a few years. But Ray Davis has been so good that he's forcing himself on the field. You wish he'd get more work. But if something that were to happen, he would be a golden parachute, I think, on your roster if you had him. So Trey Benson's been outstanding when given the chance, but it doesn't matter because of how good James Conner's been. He's just been too good to take off the field. So it's just a tough situation, but I think you got to dig in and that's how I'm going to play it.
I think that's fair. Benson is probably right up top for me just because Father Time is still undefeated. But it does look now that James Conner is kind of developing into this generation's Frank Gore a little bit. Maybe he can play into his mid-30s and just be this tough as nails guy, catches what needs to be catch, good pass blocker, great team guy. So maybe that does hold him back a little bit. Wright does make sense, same kind of thing. Mostert is aging out. Achane isn't really a back that's designed to be a lead pony and handle that much work. So I think Wright's a very smart buy there. Again, Davis still capped by Cook, but the odds are that Bills probably won't be able to pay Cook when it becomes time to do so. That's just how the numbers are going to work when you're paying the other guys. So I think good guys to take a shot on. When it comes to drafting, would you play things any differently next year? We've seen the kind of a trend now, and we're also seeing running backs get paid more in free agency. Some of the careers seem to be lasting a little bit longer. Some people thought guys like Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones were washed. They're still producing. Does it maybe make sense now, unless you have a generational talent? If you have a guy drafted in the top 10 of the NFL draft or something, so be it, even up to early second round. But just about anybody else, does it make sense in your rookie drafts now to just not even really bother in the first two rounds and then just try to acquire them by trade, or just take a bunch of lottery tickets in the third round where you were getting guys like Bucky Irving and Ray Davis and guys like that? Any thoughts on how you adjust your draft strategy?
Short of like let's just say Jahmyr Gibbs, for example, right? And people said it was a stretch. It was way too early in real life, right? When Detroit did that. But honestly, now you look and you see why. He's basically Tyreek Hill in the running back position in terms of his speed, elusiveness, quickness, and burst. And that's a real weapon. If something like that, I think it's worthwhile. But for just kind of your standard run-of-the-mill, really good running back, you look back and it's like, okay, there was Derrick Henry, right? But no one really knew he would turn into what he did. And you try to find these guys. I just think you're better off. The bulk majority are going to be second, third, fourth round picks that you pick up that are going to be fine and good. I think here and there, 1 out of every 20, 1 out of every 30 is going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs, the Derrick Henry type thing.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to being more patient in that I have, say, a ton of shares of Chase Brown, And that's not because I drafted a ton of Chase Brown. It's because everybody kind of got frustrated and cut him. And I kept adding him everywhere, especially when you could tuck him on IR last year. And that's how some of these guys are. Kyron Williams is another guy. I drafted him in a bunch of rookie drafts, but in like the third or fourth round, he wound up getting cut in roster cut downs. He wasn't even the primary backup right away. And then he kind of fell to the wayside. And then a lot of people just picked him up off of the wire. So sometimes I think it might be better to go that way. Just take your shots, especially in a league or a format like the FFPC where you have these kind of harsh cut downs in the offseason. It's going to be really tough to carry these guys, especially multiples. Maybe one, okay, you can have a developmental running back or two, but unless you're playing with leagues with pretty deep benches, you don't want to have 3 or 4 of them.
The alarm on my phone just went off to remind us that it's trade time. The trade deadline is approaching. Let's examine a couple of trades here that have gone down in our dynasty leagues recently.
Right up front, trade number 1. This was an FFPC 1 quarterback season long league. And for the record, the FFPC is a tight end premium format, generally pretty shallow. Start 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, cut down to 14 skill position players in the offseason. So again, pretty shallow format here. In this trade, Team 1 received a 2025 first. This will be a late one between 109 and 112. Team 2 received DeAndre Swift. JBG, who do you think won this one? Team 1 getting the late first or Team 2 getting DeAndre Swift?
I think team 1. The late first to me, I think is just, again, when we talk about what you can get out of the running back position, to me, I'd rather take the first and be able to address a different position or a position in need or a position with better value.
I like that because this was actually one of my trades, and I did trade away DeAndre Swift, and I put out a few offers with him included, and this one got snapped up quick, and I wasn't thrilled. There were maybe 1 or 2 that I would have liked better that involved a player, but I'm okay with it because it's just been getting it all done in the receiving game. He's had no efficiency rushing the ball, and we've seen that before. Like, we're seeing it happen with Rachaad White right now, and he's still being useful. I just have questions about the long-term value. So again, in a more shallow format, I was happy to check out for the late first, restart the clock. Trade 2, same thing, FFPC, 1 quarterback season long. Team 1 receives Deebo Samuel. Team 2 receives Keon Coleman and a 2025 second. Again, this one will be late, 209 through 212. Jamie G, I'm going to go with Team 2, and I have a funny feeling you're also going to go with Team 2. Nothing against Deebo. I would want to get a first for him, and I think Keon Coleman in a late second definitely equals at least a late first or whatever in terms of value. So I think fair deal, but I'd rather have the side with the young receiver and the pick.
I think it's super fair, and yeah, it's not. I really like Keon Coleman, and he's showed me a lot as the season's worn on. And get your wrist right, buddy. We need you back. But I think that just the value in this, you've got a receiver that is so specific to that system. If he ever finds himself in another system, it'd be really interesting to see. It's not a guarantee that it's going to hit like this. And also the injuries and the way they utilize him, it doesn't speak well for long-term kind of career. So I think for me, this one's a clear cut team number 2.
Trade number 3, once again, FFPC, 1 quarterback season long. Team 1 receives Dolphins running back Devin Achane. Team 2 receives a package, Nick Chubb, Jacoby Myers, a 2025 first and a 2025 second. Both of those picks will be in the back third of the round between 109, 112, 209, 212. Jamie G, I think I'm pretty clear. I am going with Achane here. Team 1, I'm almost always going to be on the side of the guy getting the 1 in these kind of 2-for-1 or package deals. How about yourself? You like the single here, or do you like trying to get similar production from Chubb? Myers is a throw-in, and you get 2 draft picks.
I'm going team 2. I'm going team 2 here in a surprising way. I like, don't get me wrong, really like Devon Achane, but I don't know that you're ever going to get the consistency, whether it's injury or inability to kind of, get more than 20 touches a game, that kind of thing. I think with this, you can get by with Nick Chubb and upgrade that running back position. It's more to do with the running back position in general. Jacoby Myers is a fine throw-in, and then you're getting a first and a second here. To me, I'd rather take those picks. I think it's mostly just I don't value the running back position that much.
I don't think you're wrong here. I think, again, this is a deal that probably suits both sides, especially if someone has a lot of guys on the roster. Again, you have pretty severe cut downs here, so that's why I'm generally in favor of these consolidation trades. Trade for, once again, FFPC, one quarterback, season long. Team one receives a 2025 second. This should be a decent one, at least in the top half of the round, so 206 or better. Team two receives Kareem Hunt in a 2025 third. This will be in the back third of the round, 309 to 312. And this is kind of the deal. I think this is an interesting trade because there's been a lot of action around Kareem Hunt. How do you value him? Everyone wants a second. I think this is the cost. I'm going to go with team one because they're getting a decent second, a second in the top half of the round. Yes, they had to add a late third to Hunt to get there, but I would rather do this deal than say get a late second or an early third for Hunt. And you're really not even getting that late second. So it kind of comes down to an early third. So if all you have to do is add a late third to that to get to a good second, I think that's absolutely a deal I would do. I would like team one as my winner. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think so too. Unless it's like I'm a player away from winning it all this season. And with Kareem Hunt getting the volume he's getting and getting the touchdowns, maybe, right? If it's that unique situation where it's like I need one running back that I can count on for week in, week out to get me there. Maybe outside of that, yeah, I think team one all day long, man. I like the fact that it's on the first half of the second round, and I think I think this is a pretty fair deal, honestly, for both sides.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know if Team Two also owns Isaiah Pacheco. The Chiefs are really fronting like he is going to be back soon, which surprised me. A lot of people didn't think he would make it back this season, or at least not for the fantasy season. So something to keep an eye on there. And then one last trade, trade number five, FFPC once again. This time it's Superflex season long. Team one receives Packers wide receiver Jaden Reed and a 2025 second. This is going to be a very, very good second. I don't think this team has won yet, so it'll be 204 or better. Team two receives Puka Nakua. I'm a big Jaden Reed fan, and this is super flex. That 204, that's a top 16 pick in a super flex league. That's almost as good as a late first. Some years you get a kind of a tier there where guys are going to be very similar in the early second to the late first. So I'm going to take team one, Jaden Reed in the early second. How about you, man? You going with Reed in the pick, or you taking Puka Nakua?
Look, we've all, you poke around and find out. I'm going to go with team one, two here. I just think it's the highs we saw of Puka in last year. I don't know that we're going to get back there. I just don't know that it's attainable. I think it's unfair to think that. You could do far worse than Jaden Reed. But honestly, it's that pick there, man. 204 or better. You're talking about potentially it could be 201. I mean, that's to me, that coupled with Jaden Reed, I'm probably going there. The inconsistency out of Puka with injuries, the unbelievable highs of last year that I don't know that anybody can get to again, and then just the concerns around what's going to happen long term with the Rams. I just, I think I'm leaning team one here. We got our week 11 guys on deck, but first, we want to look back at our guys from a previous episode. We're rewinding 3 weeks back to the episode we recorded after week 7. On that episode, our guys to sell were Kareem Hunt, we just talked about him, Kansas City running back, Nick Chubb, Cleveland running back, and Devontae Adams, the wide receiver now with the Jets. Mills, how you feeling if you sold these guys 3 weeks ago?
I would say pretty great overall. I don't really have a lot of complaints here. You might have felt a little bit iffy if you didn't think that Isaiah Pacheco was coming back this season, but with it looked like he's returning, I think the price tag on Hunt is going to drop pretty quickly here. So I think you have to feel pretty good about all of them, especially Devontae Adams. Maybe Nick Chubb, gets it turned around. He's a free agent next year, land somebody somewhere better, what have you. But yeah, right now I think feeling pretty good if you made these moves 3 weeks ago. So hopefully we can keep it going.
We also had 3 guys to hold 3 weeks ago. They were Amari Cooper, the wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, Romeo Dobbs, wide receiver up in Green Bay, and then Ray Davis, the running back in Buffalo. Mills, 2 of my Bills on this list, and honestly, I think holding was the right decision. I think holding's probably still the right decision given the wrist injury of Cooper. We haven't really got to see kind of the whole deal here with him, the whole package. And we also, haven't really gotten to see Ray Davis since that major run where James Cook was out. So I think you're kind of stuck holding in both those. And then with Dobbs, I think same thing. It's just kind of holding to see who's going to emerge and if there's going to be an injury to one of those wide receivers.
Yeah, I think they were correct holds back then. I think they're all still probably holds now. Cooper even more so. I don't even want to say the thing out loud. Let's just say if this wrist injury lingers longer than we think it's going to, then maybe you would be a little bit happy about getting out just because of the games lost due to injury. But I think outside of that, yeah, I think pretty comfortable holds back then. Still pretty comfortably holding. Hopefully not holding till you're comfortably numb, but just holding comfortably.
Finally, we have three guys to buy. They were Audric Estime, Denver running back, Jaden Reed, the wide receiver up in Green Bay, and the Slim Reaper, Devontae Smith, wide receiver in Philly. I think you're probably feeling like two out of the three here were pretty good buys. Esteem, depending on your roster and if you can afford to kind of stash them, but I think this list probably holds up here. What about you?
I would think so, and especially because it looks like Esty might be the guy in Denver for at least a minute here. I don't think he's going to work very much on third down, which caps his dynasty value and his fantasy value overall a little bit. They'll still work Javonte Williams and McLaughlin in there, but he's getting his shot at least. So I think that makes him more valuable right now than he was. So if nothing else, you could flip him. Reed hasn't done much since then. Packers have been on a bye on one of the weeks, but absolutely still love buying that. Same thing for Devontae Smith. I think at the end of the day, he's going to have very similar points per game to A.J. Brown, and he comes with a lower price tag. So like all three of those guys, if you were able to use a down game as a window to buy one of them, good for you.
Ring the bell. It is time for our main event. And we can't afford Michael Buffer or any of the Buffer brothers, to be honest. So you're stuck with me. This week, we're going to focus on teams that are stuck in the middle. Just like the NFL, dynasty teams never want to get caught in the muck between contending and rebuilding. Even the best golf shoes in the world, they might not get you through that. We're focusing on moves you can make that can either push you toward contender status or get your 2025 campaign started. Mills, how are we kicking off the main event?
First of all, shopping for golf shoes. Very, very good golf shoes. Some of the old ones with the metal spikes, none of this molded cleat, removable whatnot. We're going to start out with our guys to sell, and we're going to go right up top with a guy coming off a big performance overseas. Giants running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. literally just turned 24 years old on November 9th. Happy belated birthday. According to the Fantasy Pros Consensus Dynasty rankings, he is the RB26. And according to the trade calculator at keeptradecut.com, he's currently worth somewhere between a late first and an early second round pick in your 1QB 2025 rookie drafts. In the first year of his rookie contract, he had 18 carries for a $103, one touchdown, one reception for 1 yard against the Panthers in Germany. Also had that big fumble at the end of the game, and he has been very, very good. I think he's exceeded all expectations. He's gotten work faster than any of us would have expected over Singletary. I am a little bit worried that he's not more involved in the passing game. This is a guy who's a converted wide receiver that was expected to be a big part of his repertoire here, and we really haven't seen it yet. Maybe that's more on Daniel Jones. He does remind me a little bit of Antonio Gibson, another former wide receiver here. Gibson was a fair bit younger, and that's the one thing that does scare me with Tracy already. 24 years old as a rookie is a bit old for running back. Not the end of the world, but people like the younger guys and historically the younger prospects tend to pan out a little bit better over time. And this is a case where you probably got him for a third round pick, especially in a more shallow format. If you can turn around, sell him for a first now, I think I would feel pretty comfortable doing that. Yes, he could be pretty good, but I'm also worried that the Giants are going to be stuck in the muck here. And what you're trying to do is you're trading this pick, you're accepting, all right, I'm going to be contending next year. You're going to have an extra first round pick to add to your arsenal. You can trade a first round pick to basically anybody. Not everybody is necessarily going to want to buy Tyrone Tracy Jr. So this gives you more options. And if you're scoring less points now, that's probably going to help your draft pick. I'm not a big intentional tanking guy, but it's just something to think about here. If you get a good throw into, we mentioned it before, how about someone like Jalen Wright and a first? That's what I'd be really looking for. Can I get a late first? Ideally, I'd like a mid first, but if you can get a late first and a Jalen Wright, a Blake Corum, I mean, I would love a Trey Benson. I don't know if teams would go there, but I would ask, coming off of this kind of game, that's what I'm going for here. Is I really want to get an A+ offer. Take your shot at that. It's a chance like in a super flex league. Can you get into a quarterback? You need a quarterback. This might be a way to do it if a team has excess quarterbacks and they have a need at running back. Same thing in tight end premium if you're trying to trade up into an elite model. So that's pretty much where I'm at. Again, you're trying to get out of the muck one way or the other, either go up or go down. If you move him and you can get another solid running back prospect and a first round pick out of it, I'm probably going there. And again, he's been playing really well. Do not be afraid to shoot high with those offers because you're offering a young player who's producing right now. That's pretty much gold when it comes to Dynasty. And I asked you this before. Let me ask you again now. Is Tyrone Tracy the RB1 of this rookie class?
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. To me, he's RB2. RB1 is Bucky the Buccaneer. But I do think he's right there. It might even be a 1A, 1B situation. And it's mostly because of volume. He has been a little bit, this past game, a lot of, some fumble issues, 2 fumbles, one that cost the team the game. So you worry about that a little bit. You worry about the lack of the passing game, but you also just worry if that's just a more of a Daniel Jones and offensive scheme type situation. But yeah, I do think he's right there, Mills. He's RB1, RB2 for sure.
Yeah, and you do worry about that again, the converted wide receiver, just shades of Antonio Gibson. And at one point, he was a top 10 dynasty running back, and it all fell apart so quickly. So I would say if you love Tracy and you draft him in the 3rd round of every rookie draft, at least diversify your portfolio a little bit. I'm not saying sell every share, but if you're on a team that's stuck in the muck, you have multiple shares of the guy, I think it's a good spot to diversify, get that first round pick again. Once we get in the offseason, everybody always wants first round picks for the most part. It's the easiest currency to move. So I sometimes prefer that as opposed to being pigeonholed with a singular player, especially a running back, because some teams just don't value running backs that way, which leads to our number 2 sell, the king, Derrick Henry. He is going to turn 31 in January. He's all the way up to the RB13 in the consensus rankings, according to the trade calculator, worth about a mid-first in your 2025 1 QB rookie drafts, under contract through the 1 more year after this here. So through 2025, I don't think he is going anywhere. Last week he had 16 carries, 68 yards, a touchdown, 1 reception for 3 yards. The rest of the season schedule, not bad. Playoff schedule is top 5, and that's what you use to sell him. I have looked at this a couple of ways. Maybe he is generational, right? Maybe he can actually do this for 2 or 3 more years. I just think everything is lined up here. He's not getting the insane volume that you think he would. He has almost no value in the passing game, other than he does catch the occasional dump off touchdown because people just don't cover him sometimes coming out of the backfield. And you can get so much for him right now. I think in history, this might be about as much as a running back of this age has ever been worth. Again, especially one without a role in the receiving game. If you're not at the top of your league right now with what Derrick Henry is doing, he doesn't belong on your team. He is having a not quite historic season, but pretty close. He's on pace to break a couple of records. If he's on your team right now, you should be near the top of your league. If you're not, that should be a sign to take that maybe I shouldn't have Derrick Henry on this roster right now, because you can ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars for him. I'm definitely looking for a first and more. Again, I would set your sights high. I would even ask for 2 firsts if they're going to be mid to late. You just go for it. And if people can't really get mad at you, you're offering a guy, again, having almost a historic season. Any contender should pretty much at least answer to, have at least a response to any offer you might be willing to give. What do you think, Jamie G? This is the big one here. Let's say he stays healthy, Derrick Henry plays the season, and he gets to the 2,000 yards, the 20-plus touchdowns. Is he really going to be worth that much less in the offseason? That's the main question here. If he actually completes the monster season, will there be that big of a fall off? Will there be people just believe he can't repeat it again at that point, which they knocks his value down, I don't know, 25% or something? Or if he has the monster season, will he basically be worth as much then as he is now?
I don't know that he can I don't know that it could increase that much, because no matter who you are, even if you're the most hardcore Ravens fan, you start to worry about one more foot injury. You start to worry about just natural age at running back. I do think, given the fact that he spends $500,000 a year on his health and nutrition and fitness, that he's probably going to do better than most. He's kind of the perfect specimen. But I think it's, unless, and like you said, unless he's pushing you towards a championship now, You're selling at an all-time high.
You owe yourself to at least explore the market. A running back of this age with this non-involvement in the passing game, you're the only guys you're kind of sniffing are the LaDainian Tomlinsons of the world at this point. You have to be way up there. So I think you have to at least throw it out there, make some big asks, see what you can get. Next up here, number 3 guy, we have Philadelphia Eagles wide receiver AJ Brown, turns 28 next June. Currently the wide receiver 8 in the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. Worth calling an early first round rookie draft pick in one QB league, so like a top 3 pick, under contract through 2029. Philadelphia could get out potentially after 2026. Solid enough game last week, 5 grabs, 109 yards on 7 targets. Much like Derrick Henry, I think this is kind of peak value here. He's at the age where we start to see at least them get into the kind of the back section of the prime. He has a couple of decent matchups on deck here, but a pretty shitty playoff schedule. So you do worry if he closes the season out kind of cold, the Eagles kind of sputter, it really might hurt his value in the offseason. And I think that Devontae Smith isn't that far behind him, certainly not in terms of where they're valued in Dynasty. I do not think the gap is that big, especially in their production. Brown has been a touch bit more consistent, but other than that, Devontae Smith has pretty much been there with him step for step. And with the Eagles now adding Saquon Barkley, Dallas Goedert's not going anywhere. With all these options, I just don't think that Brown is going to really give you that consistent elite wide receiver 1 production that you're looking for. So I think there's a chance his trade value is worth a bit more than his production. And he's starting to deal with these nagging injuries. You always just worry about the signs when it starts being these hamstring injuries, this kind of nebulous stuff where you just miss a couple games here, a couple games there. It just scares me in the back of my mind. And this is just one of those things, again, you're not selling him just for the sake of selling him. You're trying to offer the great big shiny object, like a real guy that can make a difference for a team down a stretch. So you can ask for a lot. And I would probably, again, real early first, great. 2 first, kind of mid of the round, maybe, mid to back end of the round. Okay, but I might shoot for, say, can I get a first in a guy like Chris Olave, Rome Odunze, Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk, Rashee Rice, T. Higgins, one of those kind of guys. Can I get a first and somebody like that? There's got to be some people out there who are disappointed right now, and they're looking at all these points that Brown is putting up, and maybe you can tempt them. Let me give you a scenario, Jamie G. Here's the deal. You're the owner of a contending team, and you're not getting enough from your wide receiver position. It's holding you back. Would you, in this scenario, if you owned Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., trade them straight up for A.J. Brown? He's still pretty young. He is giving you that production right now. He should continue to do so for a couple more years. As a contender, would you be willing to make that deal even though you're sacrificing some years?
Oh man, that's really tough. I think I probably would. I think this is one of those ones where it's like the analytics say you should. And I think I probably can get there, Mills.
That's what she said. Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on your risk tolerance. A neighbor seems pretty good, but the Giants quarterback situation is unknown going forward, and Harrison Jr. is disappointed a little bit. So the fact that you had to hesitate and think about it at least means that I think it's a square deal. For a fair enough offer, no one should be that upset about it.
We're mostly focused on buying and selling this week, but I need my dose of Eddie money. So give us at least one guy to hold on to, even if your team is stuck in the muck.
I think it has to be Christian McCaffrey. He turned 28 in June, 29 next June, currently the running back 10 in the consensus rankings, worth roughly an early to mid first round pick, according to the trade calculator, under contract through 2027. San Francisco could conceivably move on after 2025. When he came back, 13 carries, 39 yards, 6 grabs, 68 yards. Not bad, but he played something at least kind of close to his normal role. And I think if you've sat there all season, especially if you're not really contending, this might be a chance where you're just like, yes, I would like to check out right now. He's healthy. He's out there. They have said words like chronic Achilles, and it's just one of those things you worry. He's had injuries other than this kind of little stretch early in his career, and then his first kind of year and a half here with San Francisco. But I think you have to hold on. Yeah, if he has a monster game in the next week or two before the trade deadline, yes, you can shop him. But if you really zoom out a little bit, he has one of the best fantasy playoff schedules. He's only 28 years old. You can maybe do a best of both worlds thing here. You hold on, you have the awesome playoff run with him, and then you can sell him in the offseason when his value is going to be higher than it is at any point before the trade deadline here. So Jamie G, let me ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 here. 1 is, oh, no worries at all. 10 is like, I'm utterly and completely terrified. How worried are you about Christian McCaffrey's injury issues and consistency going forward? 1 to 10.
7. I think it's a 7, and it's a legitimate 7, but it's such a dynamic situation. The perfect offense for him. He has the ability to just absolutely go nuclear week in, week out. I think it depends on the person, the roster, your risk tolerance, and how high you want to go up the risk ladder. But for me, it's a 7. But I think given all those things, I can put up with it a lot more than other 7s. It's a soft 7.
Yeah, or again, more of a hot medium than a mild hot, I guess. Kind of that's when you get it if you're going Buffalo wing style. I don't think anybody's really giving you anything until they see it for a couple games, and that's going to put it past the deadline anyways. And the playoff schedule is awesome. So if you're stuck in the muck, you've made it this far without him. That means you probably have a legitimate chance to at least make the playoffs and make some noise, at which point you'll have Christian McCaffrey in what looks like a top 3 fantasy playoff schedule for running backs. Yes, I think it's been really shitty to have to hold him until now, but that's what you go through the muck for. That's why you buy the golf shoes.
Yeah. And if you're stuck in the middle, acquiring the right player can help you take your roster to the next level. But you got to be careful here. Paying retail price for the wrong player can set you back an entire season. But don't worry, we've got some of the right guys to buy.
Oh yeah, your mama would love these guys. Starting with Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins, he'll turn 26 in January. Currently the wide receiver 30 in the consensus rankings, worth about a mid-first round pick according to the trade calculator. On the franchise tag with the Bengals, unlikely to be tagged again in 2025. He has missed some games here. It's unclear how injured he is. If he had a contract right now, would he be injured? You don't really know. It's one of these things, and I don't blame him. That he wants to get paid. He deserves to get paid, so he should not play unless he's 100% healthy. But it's left his dynasty owners, his fantasy owners, extremely frustrated right now, which makes it the perfect time for you to swoop in there, make an offer, try to sweep them off their feet with something that looks good, but maybe isn't quite as good to what his long-term value can be. He's been very effective when he's gotten in there. Joe Burrow's numbers have been great, but they go up immensely when he has Chase and Higgins on the field. That's an argument for them keeping them. They won't, but he knows he has to get back out there sooner than later to make sure he gets the contract he wants in free agency. And if you want to try to acquire him, what you offer, as in most trades, it's going to depend on what the other owner's roster looks like. If it's a non-contender, I think this is a spot where if you had an injured guy like a Stephon Diggs, Christian Kirk, Chris Godwin, if you could throw one of those guys and say a second-round pick in there, I would probably do that deal for Higgins now, hoping that both you're going to get production down the stretch here and have him at increased value next year as he heads into free agency. And if it's a contender, maybe you try to make a lateral move for an older guy who's been more productive thus far. Debo Samuel, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, maybe a guy like Christian Watson or Josh Downs, even if you have a bunch of these kind of younger types. Jamie G, how about you play devil's advocates for us here, just real quick, because I can think of another wide receiver who reminds me a lot of T. Higgins, former day 2 pick, very, very valuable at one point, top 10 dynasty wide receiver, and in his final season with the team, struggled with injuries. That wide receiver was Kenny Golladay of the Detroit Lions, left Detroit, signed a contract with the New York Giants, and I think he's still alive. I'm being somewhat facetious here, but the dude's only 31 years old. Like, that was it. His career was basically over at that point. It was wild. Higgins has obviously been more productive and consistent than Golladay was, but I still worry a little bit here, again, especially if he doesn't play much the rest of the way through the season. Same thing, scale 1 to 10. How concerned are you that we've already seen the best of T. Higgins?
I more than I wish I was, Mills. I'm gonna put this at a 6.5. I legit think there's a possibility that it is. That's more than 50, right? That's probably, what is that, 65%? I'm worried about it, and here's why. Sometimes these guys, they chase the money, and even if the talent is there, they go to a place where the coaching isn't there, the scheme isn't there, the quarterback isn't there, the other receiver drawing coverage isn't there, and it never lives up to the hype. And I think that's what I'm most afraid about. Look at the guys who signed big time contracts this offseason at the wide receiver position. Justin Jefferson's delivering. Are any of the other ones? It's a cause for concern.
Yeah, you need kind of a unicorn situation here as a free agent, because if he goes to a great team that has a lot of options, he's going to be inconsistent. If he goes to a shitty team where he is the main option, he's going to see a ton of coverage and defenses that just focus on taking him out of the game. So it's going to be very tough for him, I think, to find that Goldilocks zone. If he does, I think it'll work out very, very well for him, but that might mean taking less than the absolute best offer on the market. So, like you said, a lot of wide receivers have been extended already, so he might not have as many options as he thinks he does. I'm willing to gamble on it here because I think it's in his best interest to go nuts on the stretch. The Bengals are going to do everything they can. We've seen what their Burrow did against the Ravens on Thursday Night Football. Their defense is terrible. They're going to put the ball in the air. They're going to score a lot of points. So I do think he has a good chance of increasing his value from here on out. But how about another guy who's had value the entire time this season? Well, except for the first 2 weeks. Washington Commanders wide receiver Terry McLaurin just turned 29 back in September, currently the wide receiver 23 in the consensus rankings, worth about a mid first round pick according to the trade calculator. He will be an unrestricted free agent in 2026. Last week he had 5 receptions on 6 targets for $113. That's his 8th consecutive game with at least 13 PPR points. Generally, this is not an age group where I'm looking to kind of overpay for a wide receiver. But since week 2, McLaurin has been wildly efficient. His game should age well. I fully expect Washington to extend him. He will be connected to Jaden Daniels. In one of my FFPC leagues, he was dealt with a 5th for Jermaine Burton in a late first. I would do that deal every day of the week for, if I was giving up Jermaine Burton in a late first and getting Terry McLaurin. I am there for that. I would say if you're looking around and he's on a contenders roster, I probably wouldn't even bother trying to acquire him. If he's owned by the Jaden Daniels owner, same thing. Other than that, I would be very content if I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a late first round pick. I would absolutely ship that for McLaurin. And if this works out the way I think it is, you might be able to keep McLaurin for 2 years, get all this production, and still send him back out for a late first 2 years from now. So I think you could even start out with a guy if you don't want to go to the first. You have a Deontay Johnson, again, Devontae Adams, Christian Kirk, one of these guys that you can add a late second to or something like that. Just make sure you lead with a decent offer. If you really want to acquire him, don't burn the bridge by making a really insulting opening offer. Lead with like 85% of your best deal. I would say, again, you're trading for a player who's currently producing. It's not necessarily that you're trying to buy low, so the dynamics are a little bit different. Jamie G, I feel that 2 things are obvious here. One, like I said, Washington will extend McLaurin, and 2, they're going to add another wide receiver. Let's say maybe they take the plunge with D. Higgins, or they trade for DK Metcalf, something like that. How do you think that impacts McLaurin here for the production, let's say for the rest of his prime, the next 2 to 3 seasons here with Daniels, again, assuming Washington extends him? Will help, hurt, or doesn't really make a difference?
I think he can actually help Mills, and here's why. I think what we've seen him and what he excels at is the explosive down the field. And if you add a Higgins, you add a DK, you add somebody, now all of a sudden you're not going to be able to roll coverage to Terry McLaurin like you want to. We know the connection's already there with Jaden Daniels. And I think the way he reminds me almost of like a Lee Evans. Shout out Lee Evans, in terms of his ability to get down the field. And he hasn't really had any big injuries, knock on wood, to date. I just think if you add another bona fide player on that field that can occupy space, go across the middle, and take some of those crosser routes and things like that, that's going to draw safety coverage. And then you allow Terry McLaurin to get one-on-one in certain situations and go deep where he's going to be able to produce. He hits 1 and 2 of those a game. And I think that's what he does best. So in this situation, I actually think it helps Terry McLaurin.
I don't disagree. I think at worst it's kind of neutral. It's not like he's getting extreme volume now. So I don't think it's really going to change. You're just not going to be given as many, passes to Zacchaeus and Diami Brown and Zach Ertz and some of these tertiary guys that they've been getting involved here. So I agree with you there. Number 7, we had to have a super flex special. How about Byron Young, Bo Nix, Denver Broncos quarterback? He'll turn 25 in February, currently the QB 21 in the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. In a super flex league, he's worth about a mid-first 2025 rookie pick. And in a 1 QB league, call it a late second, maybe maybe early third in your 1 QB leagues again. Year one of his rookie deal, Denver holds a 5th-year option in 2028. Last week against the Chiefs, went 22 of 30 for 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 carries, 4 -5 yards. Definitely a little bit of a disappointment there on the ground, but he has exceeded expectations in that arena thus far. He has a great remaining schedule for quarterbacks, especially in the playoffs. And I don't know that he's ever going to be a top 8 dynasty quarterback, but could he be a slightly more mobile version of Jared Goff or something like that? I don't think it's impossible. I think he could be somewhere in that, QB 12 to QB 15 range, call it like a back end QB1, low end QB2 for a long time here. Pretty young guy, and you're going to have to overpay a bit to buy him now. But there are scenarios where that could really work for you both in the long and short term. Again, very nice playoff schedule here. So if you're in a 1 QB league, somewhere like that, I guess if you're in a desperate spot like you lost Dak or something, he might come fairly cheap because there's a good chance he's on someone's roster and he's their QB3, QB4. In Superflex, it's definitely trickier. If I could trade that kind of mid to late first for him, I think I would definitely do that. But if it's going to be a player for player deal, it'll definitely depend on the rosters that are involved. If you had to give up a quarterback, here's kind of the list of guys that I would interested in moving for Knicks. Maybe not necessarily straight up, but either in addition to something or for something else or what have you. Dak Prescott, Anthony Richardson, Trevor Lawrence, JJ McCarthy, Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, Michael Penix Jr. And again, not saying I trade all these guys straight up, but I think they're all kind of interesting options as compared to Knicks. And when you want to make a deal for a quarterback in a super flex league, you need to be creative. Let's start it with a real easy one, Jamie G, or maybe it's more complex than that. Rest of the season, weeks 11 through 17, who scores more fantasy points, Baker Mayfield or Bo Nix?
I'm going to say Baker Mayfield, and it's mostly just the style of offense. You're still not getting a ton of airing it out and tons of points out of Denver's offense, whereas I think for Tampa Bay you are. I think they trust Baker Mayfield a lot more to air it out, utilizing the tight end, utilizing the running backs out of space. It's not as balanced as an offense as Denver, and it's scoring more points than Denver. So I'm going to go Baker Mayfield.
Zoom out long term in Dynasty, would you rather own Knicks or Mayfield?
Probably Knicks and by the age.
I think that's fair. How about Tua? If you could check out a Tua right now in the injury concerns for Bo Nix, would you do it? Straight up.
I would. It's just too much risk for me. Look, there's people out there going to be like, you're stupid. He's way better than Knicks. Yeah, all that's true. He is. He's got playmakers. He's got the quick touch. He's got the offensive mind with McDaniel and all that. But this is way too much risk to have any comfort with really any part of Miami's offense other than the running back room for me.
I would say if you had 3 really strong QBs and you only need to start 2, I don't mind holding Tua then because you have real legitimate insurance. But if he's your every week QB2, I think, yes, I would trade him straight up for Bo Nix. How about Trevor Lawrence? Is that too much? I mean, you have to be a little bit worried. He might be out for the rest of the season. The Jaguars seem directionless. They do have Brian Thomas Jr., who I like a ton, and some other. I still like ETN, Tank Bigsby. I don't hate some of their ancillary pieces here, but at least Denver seems like they have a plan. I guess you trust in Sean Payton a little bit more. What do you think? Straight up in Dynasty, Trevor Lawrence, Bo Nix.
I like Bo Nix's rushing upside. I'm going to still go with Trevor Lawrence here. I just am. I think there's weapons there. No matter what happens with that coaching staff, it's probably best case scenario. Doug Peterson gets fired. They bring in a young, hot-minded offensive coordinator. Really sparks. I still am going to trust Trevor Lawrence and the playmakers on this offense more than Bo Nix right now. I understand the age. Trevor Lawrence just signed a big contract. He's going to be there for a minute. Looking at this thing long term, I'm going to go Trevor Lawrence.
In a vacuum, I'm right there with you. How about if you are just stuck in the muck though, and this gave you a chance to contend this season? Would that make you any more likely to pull the trigger?
Maybe, but I think I'm still probably leaning Lawrence on this one.
So not quite enough. Okay, that's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for. And guy number 8, Jamie G mentioned him before. Bucky Irving, the young buck, running back down in Tampa Bay. just turned 22 back in August. Currently the running back 28 according to the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. According to the trade calculator, they say he's worth about a mid-second round rookie pick in your 1QB 2025 drafts. Year one of the rookie contract. Last week at 13 carries, 73 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 14 yards. Great remaining schedule, especially in the fantasy playoffs. And the Tampa Bay coaching staff knows that he's better than Rachaad White. That's showing the way they're using him in the rushing game. But White is still heavily involved in the passing game and at the goal line. But on the other hand, the Bucs don't really have anybody else to throw the ball to other than Cade Otton. So both running backs are heavily involved. I think this is a case where it's going to be a bit of a tricky buy if you need to find an owner who doesn't start him every week and doesn't own him and White. And then if you can get him for that mid-second round pick, I would obviously do that in a heartbeat, no matter where you are on the contention scale, contending, rebuilding, whatever, for a mid-second. Just do the thing, do it now. And if you were looking to do a little bit of a challenge trade, I would certainly trade a guy like Javonte Williams, Braylon Allen, Jalen Warren, Tajay Spears, Zach Charbonnet, Tank Bigsby, Blake Corum, kind of anybody in that range, maybe even put a little bit of a sweetener in there because Irving is as young as most of those guys, but he's also giving you production right now with the great schedule. Jamie G, here's your question. Over the last 5 games, Bucky Irving has averaged 14.9 PPR points. So let's call it 15. Over the rest of the season, weeks 11 through 17, can he average 15 PPR points per game? And to give you context, through week 9, only 8 running backs were averaging 15 points per game.
Yeah, I think he can. And I think he's being benefited and lifted up by the lack of, the weapons at the wide receiver position, the injuries that they've had, right? No Chris Godwin. Mike Evans, when will he come back? We don't know, right? It's been Otton and it's been the running backs. And I think for better or worse, I think this offense is I won't say better, but I think it's difficult for teams to defend utilizing what they're doing right now. We saw what they did against Kansas City. We've seen what they've done in multiple different games since these injuries. I think he can. I think he's going to continue to get the work.
I do too. That's why he's on the buy list here. So I would honestly, if I was positive, like say an FFPC, my pick's going to be 109 to 112. I would probably even go a late first for him. I feel extremely bullish about his prospects. So very excited about him and very excited about our final guy here. Let's take it to the Hawk, TJ Hawkinson, Minnesota Vikings tight end. Little bit of a tight end premium special, but I'm also willing to buy him in your standard PPR leagues. Turns 28 next July. Currently the tight end 7 according to the consensus rankings. Worth roughly a late 2025 first in your 1QB tight end premium leagues. Worth between a late first, early second in your 1QB PPR leagues. Under contract through 2027. Minnesota could bail after 2025 and beyond. Second week back last week against the Texans, he had 8 receptions, 472 yards on 9 targets. And against established tight end ones, only Brock Bowers has a better schedule during the fantasy playoffs. And this just seems a case where even if Darnold is trying to blow it, when you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson is just going to be open underneath 24/7. And if you go around, you look at the rosters of his owners, they didn't have him for the first 9 weeks. So they had to do something. So they already have another solution at tight end, which I think makes it a little bit easier to trade for Hawkinson than it might be in other formats. In tight end premium, I'm pretty happily shipping a mid to late first for him without any question. And I'd say if I have somebody like Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet, Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, Dalton Schultz, I'd see what I had to add to them to get to Hawkinson. Jamie G, let me ask you the rest of the season here again, weeks 11 through 17, will TJ Hawkinson be a top 5 tight end?
I think he will. You're already seeing the volume there. I've cashed on multiple TJ Hawkinson's player prop bets since he's returned to the lineup, both in his yardage and receptions amount. I think he's going to be featured. I think they're going to continue to use him, and I think he's going to reclaim his place as a top 5 dynasty tight end, fantasy tight end in this league, period. I just do. He's the Hawk, man.
Yeah, you don't mess with the Hawk, dude. The Hawk, he strikes back sometimes. I'd rather have the Hawk than the Hawk, put it that way, man. It's both are very cool, both maybe hang out at the beach, but Hawk has better hair, so he wins the
Yeah,
tiebreaker.
don't sun the Hawk, dude. You don't sun the Hawk. You don't hassle the Hoff and you don't sun the Hawk.
Unless you're Selma Hawking. I can't combine Hawk and Hayek no matter how hard I want to try. I'm gonna have to work on that one. Hymac? No. Up to Hayak or just whatever. I like TJ Hawkinson and also Selma Hayek. Both are great.
I think that about does it. Anything else before we get out of here?
Know where your roster is. Be honest with yourself. Look at the standings. Look at your remaining schedule, both for your players and who you are playing, assuming you're in a season-long format. Don't try to just make the playoffs if there's really no hope of you actually being able to contend when you get there. Tanking, it sucks. No one wants to like lose intentionally. Again, in some leagues, it'll be about total optimal points as opposed to just your actual scored points. So it doesn't even matter. You can't tank if you want to without destroying your roster. You don't want to tank. Just do your best and do like the NFL GMs do. If you want to make your team bad, trade away some of the better players that'll force you to score less points at the cost of adding draft capital, put you in a better spot to go forward. But if you are getting close, they only give one of those trophies out. Only one team wins the first prize. So don't be afraid to make a little run at it. You'd rather try and miss than never try at all. Just making the playoffs and losing in the first round doesn't work every year. Trust me. I know a lot of fan bases who have gone through that, and they'd rather take the shot and spend a year or two in the dark. If you miss, at least you took your shot. So know where you're at as we head into the trade deadline and the final stretch of the season here.
Thank you guys for checking out Nine Guys Dynasty presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. We are them boys. We're here each and every week. We're giving you your dynasty needs. We really appreciate you riding with us. Throw us the thumb and subscribe so you don't miss a single guy. We got guys to sell, guys to buy, guys to hold. You don't want to miss one. All right, so make sure you like and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Let us know. It's the crazy trade time. Let us know the craziest trades you're getting. We like to joke about them. It makes our day. We'll share with you our craziest trades. You can drop a comment below, or Mills will let you know where you can get all of our social media.
I miss the bad trade Twitter days when the artist formerly known as was more active, but we are an active artist. Thank you for checking out Nine Guys Dynasty, presented by Seize Fantasy Football. Once again, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We're on social media at CeezeGapFF and the same place on the web, CeezeGapFF.com. Super simple and easy to remember, just like the flaps. FLAPS, oh so crucial to our success. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please remember to press the thumb. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. And we'll see you next time on Nine Guys Dynasty.
We'll be back next week with 9 more guys in a row.